Om Jnanatiminandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshormilitan Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Gurudev. Dandavat pranams to all the assembled Vaishnavas. So we're having our Bhagavad Gita study, and we are in the middle of chapter 4, Jnana Yoga. And we've just come to this section where Krishna's giving a kind of overview of different types of sacrifices and yogic practices that different practitioners follow for in the cause of seeking liberation. Um, this particular section is not so relevant to the practice of bhakti, but it's a part of the whole of Bhagavad Gita, and so we're honoring it. And it's also giving us some context, right, of different types of ways that persons approach the absolute, right? And within the broader view of things, we know that these types of practices of austerity, they fall into the category of aroha panta, right? The path of self-ascension, trying to elevate oneself through one's own practices, which we know from the teachings of our gurus, this ultimately can get us to the point of getting a passport in the sense of realizing our nature as soul, but cannot ultimately give us the visa of entrance into the eternal service world. So ultimately it is not aligned with the true nature of the soul, and it cannot help one to attain the highest prospect of the soul. But for some persons, it may be a progressive practice, right? There may be those who are following these types of practices, but then at a certain point realize that once they've achieved the fruit of these practices, realize, oh, there's actually something more, right? There's something beyond this. Now I've achieved, and we hear some cases of like that, right? Including Shukadev Goswami, who's the narrator of Srimad Bhagavatam, and others, right? They reach that attainment of Brahma Gyan, realization of spirit of the absolute. But then they get some touch of something higher, right? They get some touch of the sweetness of the dynamic service world, and they're attracted to that, and so that it can be like a stepping stone to something higher, right? Because there's a difference, right, between sincere. It all depends on whether you're sincere or not. Like some persons will be following these types of arduous practices with the spirit of arrogance, right? There will be some ego behind what they're doing because it is quite impressive, right? From the relative viewpoint, to be able to achieve this level of self-control. And so then there can also be the conception that, I am God, right? And I am God. I am from that oneness of God, of the divine, and I'm merging into that, right? That's what we call Mayavad sometimes, right? So there's Brahmavad, which is more innocent, maybe more sincere. And then there's Mayavad, which is more insidious, which has more of this ego behind it. So it just depends on the intention behind what one's doing. Some persons may be sincerely seeking out a spiritual existence, right? And then once they achieve that, they realize, oh, there's something more, right? This great white light I've merged into, this is actually the effulgence coming from the body of that beautiful Lord, right? Uh, Gurudev used to quote this, Jyotirabhyantare rupam atulam shama sundaram. A very charming expression in the scriptures. Beyond that light, beyond that white light, you could say, is that Shama Sundar, beautiful dark Lord Krishna, that beautiful black Lord Krishna. So there are those who will move forward from that position, right? And so from that perspective, we can appreciate this, that these persons may be sincerely trying to overcome the urges of the body and the mind, sincerely trying to overcome the bondage of karma, which takes us down. They want to live in the world of spirit because we are of the nature of spirit. And so these practices are helpful in that sense. And then they may act as a stepping stone, as I said, right, to go to something higher, right? So that is also possible. And ultimately, Bhagavad Gita is presenting this type of progression, right? You can kind of bypass some of these and go straight to the conclusion, what we understand to be devotion, right? Or you can go the step-by-step route, right? But the conclusion is the same. Because really, if one is sincere, then once they have some contact of that world of spirit, they will realize the origin is something personal. There's a person behind all of this. And if there's a person there, that means I can have a relationship with them and I can exchange love with them. Right? What an extraordinary and wonderful thing that is. So anyhow, we'll continue from here. So we're picking up on verse 27. We have our screen share up and we're very fortunate to have the recording of our Gurudev chanting these verses.
Indriya karmani pran karmani chapare atma sangyama yogagno juhati jnanadipite drupajagya tapujagya yogajagya tathapare sadhaya jnanajagyascha jataya sangsitavrata apane juhati pranam प्राणिपानं तथा परे प्राणापान गति रुद्धा प्राणायाम परायण अपरे नियताहारा प्राणान् प्राणेषु जुहते सर्वेप्येते यज्ञविदो यज्ञक्षैरकल्मषा यज्ञशिष्टामृतभुजो यान्ति ब्रह्म सनातनम् नायं लोकन्त्ययज्ञस्य कुतोऽन्यः पुरुषोत्तमा एवं बहुविधा यज्ञा वितता ब्राह्मणो मुखे कर्मजान् विद्धितान् सर्वान् एवं ज्ञात्वा विमोक्ष्यसे श्रेयान् द्रव्यमयादि यज्ञात् ज्ञानयज्ञः परन्तप सर्वं कर्मखिलं पार्थ ज्ञानी परिसमाप्यते तद्विद्धि प्रणिपातेन परिप्रश्नेन सेवया उपदेक्ष्यन्ति ते ज्ञानं ज्ञानिनस्तत्त्वदर्शिनः यदि ज्ञात्वा न पुनर्मोहमेवं यास्यसि पाण्डव येन भूतान्न शेषानि द्रक्ष्यस्यात्मन्नथो मयि अविचेदसि पापेभ्यः सर्वेभ्यः पापकृत्तमः सर्वं ज्ञानप्लवेनैव वृजिरं सन्तरिष्यसि यथैधांसि समेधोऽग्निर्भस्मसात् कुरुतेऽर्जुन ज्ञानाग्नि सर्वकर्माणि भस्मसात् कुरुते तथा न हि ज्ञानेन सदृशं पवित्रमिव विद्यते तत्स्वयं योग संसिद्ध कालेनात्मनि विन्दति श्रद्धावान् लभते ज्ञानं तत्परः संजितेन्द्रिय ज्ञानं लब्धा परां शान्तिमच्चिदेनाधिगच्छति अज्ञश्चाश्रद्धदानश्च संशयात्मा विनश्यति नायं लोकोऽस्ति न परो न सुखं संशयात्मनः योग संनष्ट कर्माणं ज्ञान संच्छिन्न संशयम् आत्मवन्तं न कर्माणि निबध्नन्ति धनञ्जय तस्माद् सम्भूत हृत्स्थं ज्ञानासिनात्मनः चित्तैनं संशयं योगं मातिष्ठोत्तिष्ठ भारत इति श्री महाभारत संहितायां वैयासिकं भीष्म पर्वणि श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्म विद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुन संवादे ज्ञान योग नाम चतुर्थोऽध्यायः चक्रवालेन्दुभयवत् Paitarang Pamani Bhu Vishnavi Bhu Namo Namah.
Okay, so beautiful to hear Srila Gurudev chanting these verses. So we ended up going to the end of the chapter there. And welcome, I saw Shreyash Prabhu joined us. It's always exciting. Um, so let's see, we went quite far there. So verse 27. Shreyash, are you in the kitchen or are you available? I'd love to hear you chanting the Sanskrit if you're free, but maybe you're in the kitchen. Yeah, he's in the kitchen. Okay. No worries. Happy you're here anyway. Okay, well, anyhow, we can chant here. It's 27. Sarvanindriya karmani pranakarmani chappade atma samyama yogyagno juvati jnana dipite. So we're continuing here with this overview, right, of these practices. Again, there are the yogis who offer all the functions of the senses and the life forces into the yogic fire of self-purification, ignited by knowledge. Dravya yagyastapo yagya, yoga yagyastatapade, swajaya jnana yagyascha, yataya samshita rataha. Sincere in their practices and faithful to their vows, some persons sacrifice their possessions. Some undergo strict penances as a sacrifice. Some practice the eightfold mystic yoga as a sacrifice. And yet others perform knowledge sacrifice by singing and introspectively studying the Vedas. And I was actually thinking about I was thinking about the value of sacrifice just it was this morning or last night, how powerful this action is, right? And why is that so? Because sacrifice is something that is very natural to our soul, right? That you can say that's a part of our inherent nature as spiritual beings, the tendency to sacrifice. And so when we engage in the practice of sacrifice, we are aligning ourselves with our true nature. We're coming closer to that. And there's also this power that comes because of that. Because what does sacrifice mean? It means that you are forsaking some enjoyment for your own self for the sake of a higher principle, right? And this principle is so powerful that even if we're practicing sacrifice that is aligned with the lower cause, it's still bringing us, it still yields some result, right? Like now we're going through in our Saturday meeting, right? We're discussing Prahlad Maharaj and his demonic father Hiranyakashipu, and we're hearing about like all these extreme sacrifices that Hiranyakashipu went through. And because he went through these extreme sacrifices, he was able to invite this power, right? His sacrifice was to the point that it was creating disturbance in the environment around him. He was creating this energy field, which is very powerful. And it was to the point where the universal creator, Lord Brahma, had to come and placate him, right? And try to make him happy and satisfy him with whatever his desires were. So of course that's in relation to a lower plane, um, but it shows you how powerful is this principle of sacrifice. And actually, if we want to make any type of progress, in anything, we have to have a level of sacrifice. There has to be a movement, an expression of sacrifice. And so the only question is where where we are directing that energy, right? What is the objective of our sacrifice, right? And so then this also means if we are directing that tendency in alignment with the absolute truth, right? In alignment with the center, then we are also inviting reciprocation from that higher plane, and we can raise ourselves to a higher position in the absolute sense, right? And that is ultimately our goal, right? So there's that verse. It's coming up in the next chapter, actually. Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam. I think we were talking about this yesterday. Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, right? Where Krishna is just outright saying, I'm actually the real recipient of all yagya, right? Yagya means sacrifice. It doesn't just mean a fire sacrifice, but it can also just mean that spirit of sacrifice. So Bhoktaram, Krishna is saying, I'm the real enjoyer. Yagya tapasam, I'm the true recipient of all all austerity and all yagya, all sacrifice. And so so that's like the absolute position, right? To see the true nature of reality as a whole, right? And to align ourselves with that. So what type of power are we inviting, right? And this is power of the sort where we are, the one who sacrifices wholly in connection with that highest principle, that absolute being will become submissive to them. Right? To the point where Krishna is saying, I have no independence. It's as if I have no independence. I'm a slave to the love of my devotees. So everything, for one who is a devotee of Krishna, everything will come to serve them, to help them, right? So all these things that generally we're searching after in this world, right? Wealth, power, followers, and so on. All of these things will come to serve the Krishna Bhakta, right? That is actually the rightful position of opulence, right? Opulence likes to serve Krishna, right? Lakshmi Devi, right? She is the goddess of wealth. She is a loving servant and beloved servant of Lord Narayan, right? So this is the power of devotion, of Bhakti Devi, right? Because it's the central principle in the whole of existence. If we are sacrificing in the cause of that, then all power will come, to serve one who has embraced that principle. Right. But then the interesting thing is that one who has achieved that position, they're not interested. They're not interested in having those things because they're realizing something sweeter, right? They're in touch with something sweeter, with something higher and more fulfilling, right? But of course, if it is ever useful in service, then they're using that, right? That principle has also been shown by our gurus, right? Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, he very much had that spirit that we will use everything in the service of Krishna. Srila, I'm talking about like on a big scale, right? And also Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the original Prabhupada, he very much had that spirit, right? I mean, boldly he had that spirit to the point of like disturbing people and shocking people because he was so forthright about this principle, right? To the point where he wrote this shloka declaring this principle, and our Gurudev actually adjusted it because he said this is actually too shocking, for most people, right? That shloka, which we were just talking about recently, that Matala Harijana Kirtanarange Pujala Ragapata Gaurava Mange, right? Um that this verse is saying, right, that the sadhus, they are madly engaging in kirtan, right? And they're in the posture of reverence doing puja to the path of raga marg, spontaneous, automatic, devotion for the Lord. But the original that Saraswati Thakur composed, it was Matala Sarujana Rishaya Range, not saying that they're madly engaging in kirtan, but they're what are they doing? They're madly engaged in using the sense objects of this world. Vishai, right? Vishai means like generally refers to material objects of sense enjoyment. A vishayi is used, that word means an enjoyer, right? So vishai means the things that an enjoyer will use, material things of this world. Like it's bold and shocking what Sarsi. I mean, not just that they're using it, but Matala madly they're using these things. And Saraswati Thakur's point is yukta vairagya, right? Not that we're artificially renouncing the things of this world, but we are actually using them in the service of Krishna. We're not afraid of anything, right? We're not afraid of anything. We will face anything and everything in the world, and we will stand strong in our connection with the absolute center and see everything as instruments of service in the cause of the absolute center, right? This was the almost like a war cry of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He had this nature of a fighter, right? Krishna Santosh, right? That was another expression he would use. Everything for the satisfaction of Krishna. So the more that we can embrace this principle of sacrifice, the more we will be uplifted in our lives. And again, right, any type of sacrifice is good. Just to get into that movement, like Srila Sridhar Maharaj quotes this expression in one place, give ashes if you must, but practice the hand to give. Like by any means, even if you're just giving something useless like ashes, just get into the movement of sacrifice, right? Get into the movement of service. Practice the hand to give. So any type of sacrifice is very healthy and uplifting for us. But then what to speak of aligning ourselves with that spirit of sacrifice towards the absolute, towards the center of all of existence. That is the most powerful movement that one can make. And the more we can do that, the more we will uplift ourselves. And the more we are inviting grace upon us too. That's another aspect of our sadhana from the perspective of bhakti, the path of bhakti, that our conception, the Vaishnava conception, is not exactly that by our sadhana, by our practices, we are bringing ourselves up, but rather through the spirit of surrender that's behind our practices, we are inviting divine grace, right? And it is that grace and that mercy that is the activating principle that is purifying us, stimulating us, awakening us, and bringing us closer to our inner identity and connection with the Lord. So we are trying to embrace this principle of sacrifice. And there are so many different levels of understanding, right? Here there's some here in this chapter in Gita, right? There's description of these types of sacrifices, which what is the purpose of them, right? To help one to overcome bodily identification, right? Bodily, mental, egoic identification, right? And that has some value. But at a higher stage, one will realize, this sacrifice doesn't mean so much. If I've already come to a point of liberation, then what? Right? Then what does it mean to sacrifice something which doesn't even have any real meaning, right? Once you're free from bodily identification, once you don't identify with the soul, then, then what? Right? So dharma, artha, kama, moksha. These principles are all relative to the conditioned soul, to the soul under the conception of the body, right? Liberation, moksha, is something that one will strive for when they're in the embodied state. But what happens if you become a normal soul, right? You're no longer laboring under that misidentification. Then what? How does that principle of sacrifice continue within immortality, right? And so then that's where Mahaprabhu comes in and with, oh, Pancham Purushartha, right? There's actually a fifth goal of life. That is prema, right? That is divine love. To sacrifice our heart, to sacrifice our innermost self, our innermost being, that is sacrifice in the absolute sense, beyond conception of the body and mundane relativity, right? And so that's also where Srimad Bhagavatam comes in, right? Because Vedavyas compiled all the scriptures and realized something was missing, right? I've discussed all these things, I've covered everything, but I feel like something's missing, right? And then Narada came and said, yes, you've given something for sick people, but what about the normal soul? What about a healthy person? What's the way for them to live, right? If someone's already achieved the position of immortality, then what? Right? Yes, you've given something for people who want to enjoy in this world. You've given something for people who want to get out of this world. But what about people who are already at a neutral position, right? Who've already transcended the conception of body? What will be the nature of their positive and progressive spiritual life, right? Is there a positive dynamic plane of eternal existence? Within eternity, does that exist? And so then Srimad Bhagavatam began on the basis of that. Like, oh, I need to make that clear. That was Vedavyas's realization. I need to make that clear in a systematic way with a strong philosophical foundation. I need to demonstrate what is the positive and progressive life of the immortal soul, right? Once they've already transcended this worldly plane. So this is the conception of sacrifice according to bhakti, right? The principles of bhakti. Okay. So go on here. I'll just read this translation. Others practice breath control, closing the right nostril and inhaling through the left. They bring the ascending air into union with the descending, closing the left nostril and exhaling through the right. They similarly offer the descending air into the ascending. Then closing both nostrils, they check both ascending and descending airs. Yet other practitioners of sense control offer all the senses into the life airs by reducing their food intake. Sarvepyete yagya vido yagya kshayita kalmashaha yagya shishtamrita bhujo yanti brahma sanatanam. All these persons are knowers of sacrifice, purified by sacrifice. Enjoying the nectarian remnants of sacrifice, they attain to the eternal plane of the Absolute. And so, there is Amrita, right? There is Amrita, there is nectar to be tasted in this state, right? Sometimes, there's a tendency for us Hare Krishnas to, poo-poo, um, the experience of these realized jnanis, but actually they are experiencing bliss, because the nature of our soul is blissful, right? Ananda, Satchit Ananda. The nature of our soul is blissful. I mean, we actually can't really imagine how much bliss there is within our own self, right? So they are tasting joy and bliss. But the real point is that in connection with Krishna, right, who is the embodiment of all Ananda, who is Ananda, there is infinitely more to be experienced, infinitely more. There's one analogy given like 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 the water in a calf's hoof print, right? That's the comparison of what we can experience with our own self compared to what can be experienced in connection with Krishna. So not to diminish, what is actually experienced within the self. That is also something very, very great. But then how much greater is the experience of bliss in connection with Krishna, if that analogy can be given of the hoof print of a calf, right? Um, I am locust staya yasya kutonya kuru satama. O Arjuna, foremost of the crews, without sacrifice, one cannot attain fulfillment in this world, to say nothing of the next. So this is the point we were discussing earlier, right? That actually you can't achieve anything materially or spiritually without embracing this principle of sacrifice. Sacrifice is the means of progress, both materially and spiritually, right? And of course, our goal is to direct that in our pursuit of devotion and relationship with the Absolute. And what type of response that will yield, we cannot really imagine. Thus, many types of sacrifice are described in the Vedas and allied scriptures. Know that they are all accomplished through action of thought, word, and deed. Knowing this, you will be liberated from the bondage of action. O Arjuna, subduer of the enemy, knowledge sacrifice is superior to the sacrifice of material objects, because the perfection of all action, including its fruit, is its culmination in knowledge. And yeah, this is actually quite a key line in Bhagavad Gita, the Sarvam Karma Kilam Partha Jnane Parisamapyate. But first, I also just wanted to mention, it just struck me the other day, you know, I've been appreciating more and more like just how personal Bhagavad Gita is, how it is at its core a loving conversation between God and his dear friend, right? And so you see that coming through in different ways. And one way in which you see that is just hit me the other day is how Krishna is repeatedly saying Arjuna's name, but also he's not just saying Arjuna, he's actually using so many different names, which is so deeply affectionate and personal. I mean, like just think about it. Like if you're having a discussion with a friend and they're referring, you have your main name, but then you may have some other names, you may have some nicknames, right? You may have names you were known by at different phases in your life, or may have pet names and all these things. And that's like it's someone quite intimate to you who will refer to you by these different names. It makes things very personal and intimate, right? And Krishna is doing that, and just the fact of saying the name, right? That's very, very personal, right? Again, if you think you're having a conversation with someone, when you say their name, like you're igniting this bond, right? It makes the conversation, makes the discussion much more personal and affectionate. And so it's actually extraordinary how often Krishna is repeating Arjuna's name. Like sometimes it's almost every verse, and it's unique every time, right? Kuru Sattama. I don't know if that's used anywhere else in Gita, that expression. Kuru Sattama, best of the Kurus, right? He's of the Kuru lineage. And then this one we've just come to Parantapa. This one you see fairly often. Parantapa, that's another name for Arjuna, the conqueror, subduer of the enemy, conqueror of the enemy, which is also, you could interpret that in different ways. And one way it's like very encouraging, like to him, like you're coming to fight this battle of justice, you will be successful, right? But then you could also think of it in connection with the inner world, right? Conqueror of the self and the enemies within, right? We can also think of it like that. So anyhow, I just wanted to take a pause to appreciate that. Um, so yeah, a few interesting points here. Um, knowledge sacrifice is superior to the sacrifice of material objects, right? And so we were mentioning this earlier, right? How as we progress, as we go through our process of evolution, our conception of what sacrifice is will become more refined, right? So in the beginning, there may be a conception of sacrificing our material possessions, right? And of course, that's also appreciable, right? That you've used your possessions, your wealth, your resources for a higher cause, that is appreciable. Then higher than that is to sacrifice your own self, right? For that cause. But then even higher, but then what is the conception of self? That will also become more refined, right? Sacrificing your body, that you're engaging your body in this, that you're engaging your ego in this, right? But ultimately is your very core, your soul that you want to offer, that you want to sacrifice, your innermost self. And there's that expression, that Jagabandhu Bhakti Ranjan, right? Some of you will remember him. He was a prominent, wealthy disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, right? And he gave the money for the construction of the Gaudiya Math in Kolkata, Bagh Bazaar, Gaudiya Math. And Saraswati Thakur praised him for that, had much appreciation for his service. But Jagabandhu Bhakti Ranjan, he wrote these prayers expressing, what is really the value of what I've done. He says, I've simply given to you what is yours, right? Nothing belongs to me anyway, right? So what is the value of giving? This is the view of the devotees, right? That we are just caretakers. And so in offering our possessions to the Lord and to the Vaishnavas, the feeling is I'm just giving to them what is theirs, right? I am just the caretaker. I'm just a steward, right? I am just managing these things, but actually it is the Lord's property. And when it is needed in the Lord's service, I will give it for that, right? But it's not my own. So that's a higher conception, right? There's no there's no possibility of any ego to stand within that land. And there's a beautiful article by Srila Sridhar Maharaj. Devi Shish Prabhu published in one of his Gaudiya Darshans, and Srila Sridhar Maharaj was
Sorry,
talking.
what did I miss? Everyone's gonna die. Today Didi did so much.
Um, oh, Subhasini Didi's here as well. Dandavat Didi, so happy you're here. Oh, I forgot what I was saying now. um,
The article published by Devashish Prabhu in
oh,
Gaudiya
yes.
Darshan.
Oh, thank you very much, Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu. Yeah, it's called The Land of Absolute Reality. Land of Absolute Reality. Extraordinary article. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj was saying in that plane, there's no room for any ego to take a stand, right? But everyone feels that everyone else is bestowing mercy upon them, right? And he mentions the example, right? The guru is is instructing the disciples, and the guru is not feeling any arrogance about that, that, oh, I'm teaching them, I'm benefiting them. But he's seeing, his feeling is that the students, my disciples, are bestowing mercy upon me by hearing my words, right? And he will also feel, right, this knowledge that I have, this is a gift which has been given to me to share with others, to pass on to others, right? And I am privileged to be able to be in that position, right? And my students are blessing me by giving heed to my words, right? And then the students, of course, they're feeling, oh, we are so blessed by our teacher who is kindly sharing these instructions with us, right? That this is the nature of the absolute reality. There is no room for any ego to stand there. And he also mentions in that article, he also mentions the example of Sudama Vipra, right? Sudama Vipra, who was Krishna's childhood friend, his schoolmate, his friend, young boyhood friend at school, studying under Sandipani Muni, right? And Sudama Vipra was very poor, right? And later on, turns out Krishna's actually a member of the royal family of Mathura. And so Krishna's living this life, royalty. And he comes to hear of how Sudama is living, and he invites him to visit him in his palace. And he ends up gifting Sudama Vipra with a palace of his own, right? But what we see is that Sudama does not move from his position of surrender and God consciousness, pure God consciousness. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj describes this very beautifully, saying that he does not move from his service-centric view, right? It's service-centric view, right? His view is that, he is a servant, right? And everything is to be used in the Lord's service. And so whether I'm living in a small mud hut, whether I'm living in a grand palace, I remain a servant, right? It is an absolute position. It is an irrevocable position, infallible position to be in when one has that link with the absolute center. And there's also this beautiful verse in Bhagavatam, and perhaps Srila Sridhar Maharaj quoted it in that article. Sattvam, how does it go? Maybe Vasam. Oh, maybe Savasni can remember that verse. Nirgunam, Vasam. I can't remember the Sanskrit right now, but it's saying that that life in the mode of goodness is in the forest. Vanam tu satviko vaso. I think it's like that. Let me look it up. Vanam tu, actually, it should be in the Veda base. I don't know if I can I'll open up a new tab. Vanam tu, yeah, that's it. Vanam tu satviko vaso. Gramo rajasam uchate. Tamasam dyuta sadhanam maniketam to nirgunam. That's the verse. That's the verse. So saying that, life in the mode of goodness is in the forest, right? So, simple living, high thinking, that's generally how we are encouraged to live, right? To take minimum need from this world, just what we need for our own upkeep, and to give maximum energy towards our higher spiritual cultivation, right? That is what is represented by living in the forest. Vanam tu satviko vaso. And then gramo rajasam uchate. Life in the mode of passion is in the town, right? In the city, right? So that means a life of, activity in this world, trying to achieve various things in this world, doing this, doing that, going here, going there, in the sake of, of increasing one's wealth and attainment in this worldly plane, right? And then tamasam duta sadhanam. Okay, it's I don't know what's going on. Maybe my internet connection. Tamasam duta sadhanam. That life in the mode of ignorance is in the gambling house, right? That means a lazy, ignorant, wasteful life. Life of no achievement, no meaning, very lower consciousness. But then the final phrase is very interesting, right? Because you look at those three things, okay, yeah, that's all clear, right? And obviously, I'm trying to go for the simple living, high thinking, right? We talk about that sometimes. But then, boom, the last line, man niketam to nirgunam. Then Krishna is saying, but a life with me is nirguna, right? means one who is connected with me, they are in a nirguna position. That means they are free from the modes. They are free from sattva, rajas, and tamas. Right? They're that person's in a powerful position, very powerful, absolute position. And what does that mean? That one can live in any one of these situations and their position is absolute. Whether it's a simple life in the forest, limited, small resources, wealth, etc., whether living an opulent life with wealth and power, position, and whatever it is, in whatever way you're living, because it's in connection with me, you are in an absolute position. Your position of your spiritual position is not affected, right? You're living in spiritual consciousness. So whether you're living in the little hut or whether you're living in the palace, in a sense, it's the same because you're living in the spirit of service to me, right? And everything you're doing is for the cause of that higher center. So this is the real principle of Krishna consciousness, right? And so generally we try to live that life of simplicity. It's generally more helpful for us, but that's not the absolute principle. The absolute principle is that we may live even with so much wealth around us. We may live with so much of what in one consciousness we may call temptation, right? But we will see that as the ingredients of service to Krishna. And maybe I'll just stop our screen share here. And yesterday, welcome, Anjil. Happy you're with us today. And yesterday, right, I started going through that text that I mentioned Sripad Tirthamarsh had shared with me. And I didn't read to the end because we were just running out of time. But then later on in that article, Srila Sridharmaraj also told this one story, which I think some of you are aware of, and I have shared this before, but is telling the story of this one sannyasi. And I've heard our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, also tell this story in more detail. In the article, he just referred to it, but it's quite a wild story. So this was a sannyas disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And the Saraswati Thakur's movement was centered around preaching, right? And so he had sannyasis and preachers, traveling throughout the whole of India, spreading the message of Mahaprabhu. And so there was this one sannyasi, and what happened actually was that he got conned, he got tricked, and he met one wealthy businessman and asked him for some donation. And that businessman played a trick on him. He gave him an address and told him to go there, and the person there would give him a donation. And so this sannyasi, he went and did that. And he went and knocked on that door. It turned out it was the home of a prostitute. And he was shocked and horrified and humiliated and angry. And he actually went back to Saraswati Thakur like in this angry mood, how is this what our mission is about? Kind of like just venting. When you're angry, you can just take it out on anyone. So he's like, is this what our mission is about? I even have to go somewhere like that. But Saraswati Thakur very boldly, he said, yes. He said, we are not afraid to face anyone or anything. And actually, nothing is wrong in this world. It is just our own perspective on it, right? So to go everywhere and to see everyone you meet as a loving servant of Krishna, right? Rather than an object of our own enjoyment and exploitation, right? That is the absolute position, right? And that was Saraswati Thakur. He actually published these two verses on the front cover of every edition of his monthly magazine, the Gaudiya. These two verses from Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, defining what is Yukta Vairagya and what is falgu vairagya, what is real proper renunciation and what is false useless renunciation. So what is proper renunciation? To see everything within the relativity of Krishna's interest, right? Nothing is to be rejected, but everything is to be seen as Krishna's property for Krishna's satisfaction. And from that view, you know, everything is perfect, right? Everything, so we don't need to be afraid of wealth. We don't need to be afraid of beauty and all these things, but we see everything as Krishna's property and for the service of Krishna. And through this vision, we will transform our environment, right? And nothing can move us from that divine vision. So that is the real principle of Krishna consciousness. Well, I'm excited to see Suvasini is with us. Suvasini, do you want to add any thoughts to our discussion today?
No, Rishaka, that was beautiful. Whatever you said, that was so nice. Yes, I really also like that. Like you had on the side point, like Bhagavad Gita, how this conversation between like friendly, affectionate expressions you can see right in the different that I also. I'm beginning also to note those things, like when you read that, it is really wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? Just recently it's been like striking me more and more, and like now I'm noticing like more and more points,
Yeah, that's true. Like Gurudev also mentions that in a few places actually. In the 6th chapter. Yeah, that's some things.
The 6th chapter, you're talking about revealed truth, is it?
No, Bhagavad Gita.
Oh, in the 6th chapter, huh? Okay.
Yes,
That'll be
this one
something to
verse.
look out for.
Yeah. He said that this verse, Nahi kalyana kritkashit durgatim tata gachati, like that. He said, my dear child, like he says, like my dear child.
Right.
Tata gachati. Yeah,
Right.
like that. Anyway, yeah, whatever, you shared, it was really, I forgot that verse, Vanam Satviko Vaso, that, that was nice,
Yeah, it's
nice
such
to
a
hear
nice
that
verse,
again.
isn't it? And I see
Yeah.
Rishabhanavi shared the reference in their chat here if anyone wants to look it up. Yeah, such a nice verse.
Nice verse. Thank you.
Srila Sridhar, she actually quoted that verse. We have a clip from Srila Sridhar's talk at the opening of the Chandradoy Mandir ISKCON Mayapur 1973. Right, there's a clip of Srila Sridhar's talk. That was like a very historic, momentous occasion. So we're very fortunate we got to have a clip of his talk there. Prabhupada Swami Maharaj invited him to speak as the guest of honor, and Srila Sridhar actually quoted that verse. When I heard that, it really made a very deep impression on me. So Srila Sridhar quoted that verse in this talk, in this grand assembly on this very historic occasion, and explaining like this is the principle of our movement, right? That we will use everything in the service of Krishna. And I was thinking, how also in the case of Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, he actually didn't even tell his disciples about the 5th regulative principle, right? He talked about the 4 regulative principles, right? Of no intoxication, no meat eating, no illicit sex, no gambling. But there's actually a 5th one, which is gold, right? To hoard gold. And in from one perspective, it's the most dangerous because it can lead to all of the others, right? If you have wealth, you can easily misuse it for useless things, right? But Prabhupada, he didn't mention that one. He quietly overlooked it. And the reason for that, our Gurudev explained, is because he needed gold, he needed wealth for Mahaprabhu's mission, right? So that was his higher perspective, that we will use Lakshmi. We will use wealth in the service of Krishna. We won't shy away from that. So he quietly overlooked that one for the sake of the higher principle.
So there's some positions he really overlooked this. There was a stockbroker that had come into ISKCON and said, I'm going to go back to doing stocks. And he says, no, 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 don't do that. Take the money, play the stocks, and put the money into ISKCON. So Prabhupada really looked over that one.
Yeah, so that's a good example. And I've also heard, as a not exactly with wealth, but then with fame, right? In the case of George Harrison, right? I've heard that George Harrison was really ready to give up his career, just wanted to become a simple devotee of Krishna, but that Prabhupada said, no, this is your service, you're helping to bring people to Krishna consciousness. So see that as your duty and your service to Krishna and continue with
And
that.
so this leads into another really good point, right? That it's the when and where to take these positions, right? Because in the morning they'll show the deities. There's a song they play, and that woman who sings that song, I forget her name, forgive me, was actually trained by Harrison, and he goes, "Oh, I can make you into a great singer. Why don't you come and do this?" And she goes, "No, I don't want that." And Prabhupada said, "No, that's not what her calling is, right? Her calling is to."
Mm,
So the when and where is really important, not
mm.
just the like, oh, forget half of it. No, sometimes, we make exceptions because this is going to Krishna's good.
Yes, yes. And we're all on our own path as well, right? And different things are suitable for different persons. So yeah, that's another nice example. The Radha Krishna Records, right? That's beautiful, that
Yeah,
that album. Yeah, I don't remember her name either, but maybe someone here does. But yeah,
gorgeous.
yeah. Yeah, that's another nice example. And that's also, we can mention the qualification of the Paramahamsa Vaishnavas, right? The essence drinking Vaishnavas, that they're able to appreciate the principles of time, place, circumstance, the individual. They know how to apply everything appropriately in every circumstance, whereas we may not always have that vision. But then those with that higher vision, we see how they adjust things according to these considerations. And we saw that very much with our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj. Jamuna Tunga, yeah, Tungarasa is saying. I was also thinking Jamuna, but yeah, I wasn't sure. But yeah, that confirms it. It must be Jamuna.
Yeah.
But yeah, we saw that with our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj too. He could give completely opposite instructions to different individuals according to their nature, right? According to what was necessary. And so we learn from their example.
It really is a gift to be able to know what goes where when. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And at different phases in our life, right, that can change too. Right? Like Suvasini did. I remember she told me at one point in her life she was eager to preach. And our Gurudev like kind of subdued her. But then some years later he told her, like, now you must preach. Now is the time to preach. And he was very personal like that, he was really like looking at everyone individually over periods of time and adjusting his instruction also according to the evolution and the different stages that his disciples were going through. So I also experienced that with Srila Govinda Maharaj too. So yeah, it is a gift, as you said, Angel, to be able to witness that and then try to apply that in our own lives. And it's a dynamic reality, and progress is dynamic, right? And Saraswati Thakur, he was very fond of that instruction. Religion is proper adjustment, right? So that means there's always this dynamic movement of adjusting and readjusting according to the necessity.
So there's the gift of witnessing it, right? But there's also the gift of the responsibility of being in the position to give that what do you say, suggestion on someone else's life. Like school teachers get this a lot. They have to make suggestions for each student, right? So it's not an easy gift, but it's a very powerful one.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, maybe we'll stop there for today. It's been a really lovely meeting with you. Always grateful for your good association. And yeah, we got a little sidetracked because I actually didn't, we were discussing verse 33. Um, and there's actually, other very important points about that verse. It's a key verse. And then also the next verse, Tad Vidi Pranipatena. Some of you know it's quite a famous verse. So yeah, we'll have to come back to this next time and go into the verses in more depth. So I'll look forward to that. Jai Shri Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Shri Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, all the assembled devotees Ki Jai, Jai Suvasini Didi Ki Jai. Look forward to seeing you next time. Jai Shri Gurudev.
Jai Vishaka Didi ki jai. Thank you so much, Vishaka.
Oh, thank you, Didi. Thank you all.